Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Wanis Chalabi, Principal of Salam School of Milwaukee. Today, I am not going to talk to you particularly about educational issues. Maybe some of you know me as a school principal and as an educator, but I'm also a linguist. So today, I decided to talk to you about translation issues. Well, it's very difficult to separate the translation from the translator. So if we have translation issues, we would think that, these issues are equally contributed to by both the text and the person who's dealing with the text. So just for the purpose of this very brief talk, we're going to try to talk about the translator, and then we'll talk about the translation. Although these two parts are not easily separable. You cannot separate them easily because translation is just a cognitive process and it's a cognitive product. So it's very difficult to take the product or to discuss the product away from the producer. Now, let's first start by differentiating between translation and interpretation. Interpretation is usually a verbal translation, and although it's a similar process, but it's usually on the spot and would require an added set of skills and more of mental readiness and things of that sort. And actually, our brief talk today will not touch on that. We're going to touch only on translation, which is a textual issue. You're going to transfer a text from a source language into a target language. Speaking of the translator, an easy definition for a translator is he or she is an excellent writer in multiple languages, at least two. Also, you will always find out that it's safer if a translator is translating into his own language. So the target text, the translator has a native ability as he does this. Now, we know that there are a few exceptions there where the two hands of the translator happens to have equal strength. But those exceptions, even with a person who represents that exception, he would feel more comfortable translating into his own language. Well, some researchers have come out with terminology that which is a language of habitual use. That means maybe your native language is a language that you don't use habitually anymore, so it might be easier for the translator to translate into his habitual use language. Well, we are not going to agree or disagree with that, but it's usually safer if the translator translates into his language. That means the target text is in a language on which he has native mastery. Also, the translator should be able to digest the text of the source language and then reproduce it into a target language. Now, that requires the translator to be aware of many things as far as the text and readership are concerned. First, the purpose of the translation will also decide, or that's the first factor, is that why or what's the purpose of translating this particular text. The translators try to come into a middle ground between fidelity and transparency. In a nutshell, it stands very true to the source text. transparency, that means your translation is not reading as a translation anymore. It's like, the readership will not figure out that this is translated from a source text, but rather it's just like a work that has been creatively put in the target text. Or to them, even the whole concept of source text or target text won't be even there. Maybe if they missed out on reading the cover of the book or whatever the translation is, they will not feel that the text is translated. This is simply because the translation is is subject to the norms of the target text. It doesn't carry over any elements or any foreign elements from the source text. Since we're talking about foreign elements, well, that also throws us into another struggle, where the translator will have to make a decision as whether he's going to bring the text to the reader or he's going to bring the reader to the text. So are we going to bring the author home, or are we going to send the reader abroad? So that also, these are the other sides of translation or fidelity versus transparency, or foreignization versus domestication. Now, as I don't intend for this short talk to be heavily loaded with terminology, I may just go in passing on what certain terminologies are used interchangeably as or with each other. Also, the second thing that I will decide on the how the translator is going to reproduce the translation is also the readership or the reader's background of the topic, or even the context of the translation. We have to ask or the translator may ask himself or herself, are we introducing a subject? Is this is this introductory translation? Or is it translated to readership who is well versed in the knowledge of the subject matter? That will also control the choices and the behavior of the translator. That also runs the gamut based on the context. Are we trying to give the reader the message? Can we jest the translation? Is it just like simply telling the reader what we want him to know or what we want them to know? Or are we going to provide a detailed translation? So the context also runs the gamut. Now, as we all know that translation always loses, the translator has to be very skilled in making a decision what to lose. No matter what, translation always loses. We all know that. All linguists know that. But a good translator will decide as which loss is necessary. Every decision will always have losses versus gains. Sometimes even the translator will have to calculate the overhead of the loss. Is this a major loss, or is it a necessary trade-off loss? So the translator will have to make that decision as well. So like this, we have covered the translator. I will be talking to you soon when we are touching base on the translation itself. Bye-bye.